It took a little longer to do this time because I was trying to find a good place to record. It kind of feels like a classic horror movie shot to me. I don't know, there's all kinds of distracting background obstacles and openings where certain death might be hiding. So there's two visible doorways behind me, and there's also a creepy, I don't know if you can even see it in there, but there's like this creepy hole in the wall, sort of lingering there, and like the very, you see where it gets really, really dark there? You probably can't see. I don't think I can barely see, but there's like this weird hole in the wall there, and I have no idea what's even through it. I've never actually ventured. I can see it's probably like storage, or there's some dolls. So I think it was supposed to be some kind of a storage area, but it's really just a creepy hole in the wall for all intents and purposes. Scary things are gonna crawl out of it when I come down here to play a little bit of Insomnia Pool. Oh, besides the two doors that you can see, there's at least two other doors in this room. They're kind of disguised as part of the wall. You put pressure against them and they pop open, and then there's suddenly a doorway where there was just a wall a minute ago. So The Walking Dead. Overall, heartwarming. That's the word. Eastman and the cute goat. I really felt for Eastman. I kind of agree with some interpretations that I've seen floating around, you know, that his philosophy is maybe the result of his own trauma, and that there's a little bit of irony there with him not being able to see that in himself. But that's all right. Eastman's philosophy is what Morgan needs right now, and more importantly, what Morgan needed when he encountered him, and what Eastman needed. So I do have some philosophical problems with Aikido that actually predate this episode. I took a little bit of Aikido. It's not my favorite. Hungar Kung Fu, that's really what I mainly study. I was made by my Sifu to go ahead and take a few Aikido classes precisely because he wanted me to take the message of Aikido to heart. And it clearly didn't work because I disagreed with Eastman. I don't mean to say that I think that killing is great. Obviously, killing is terrible and it should be your last resort, but it is an option. One of the things that was appealing about Hungar Kung Fu is that every block becomes an attack. Without getting too weirdly personal, I'm just not interested in redirecting my enemies. I'm a woman and therefore perceived as vulnerable to certain people who might attack me. And so my philosophy isn't that their life is precious. My philosophy is that my life is precious, and I want to hurt them for trying to undermine the preciousness of my life. I did really appreciate him mentioning that armbar, though, because that's like my favorite. I love armbars, you guys. Armbars, just, okay, I won't talk about this anymore, but I'm a big fan of the armbar. I was happy he mentioned it. Thanks, Eastman. Anyway, I don't want to go off about the martial arts aspect of this too much, but for me, that was a big aspect of why I really loved this episode and why I related to it so hard. That having been said, I thought that it was perfect for this particular character. It suited the situation so well. It was a moving use of that philosophy. I was having lots of nostalgic martial artist feelings during the course of this episode, especially when Eastman turns to him and goes, "Forms, right now." I can't, you guys, I can't tell you how many times my Sifu turned to me and said those exact words when I was mad. He corrected his form. Oh, this is not universal. This is not a universally appealing thing. This just personally was very moving for me. I was honestly getting a little bit emotional during this episode. I kind of wanted to like call or text my Sifu afterwards and just be like, "I love you so much." But he doesn't watch The Walking Dead and he would think that was weird, so I didn't. I could say something like, "Sifu, in the zombie apocalypse, please don't get bit for me." I liked Eastman's conviction and how that translated into him being a vegetarian and into him trying to save Morgan. Because I think he recognizes all life is precious, not just on the not killing people plane, but also on the plane of helping other people discover how their life is precious. And he did that for Morgan. And I think he meant to. I think that his entire focus on Morgan was to help him rediscover what was precious about his life. And Tabitha, I knew they were going to kill Tabitha. I mean, it was a foregone conclusion. She's obviously this adorable little goat who we love, and if she's not with Morgan now, and if Eastman didn't end up going on the journey with Morgan, then Tabitha has to be dead. And like I knew that from the beginning. I went into this episode knowing that the goat wasn't gonna make it out, and it still hurt. Stop killing the animals, The Walking Dead. I will always be grateful to them for not depicting infected animals, because that, to me, is the most upsetting thing. But I still don't appreciate all the eviscerated livestock. I loved Morgan's little call-out moment at the end of Eastman telling his story. The little moment when he just says, "Oh, you're good at redirecting." That was beautiful. And I knew right then that Eastman had carried through it, that I think a lot of us picked up on that. So for me, it wasn't a surprise to see him in the graveyard. But it was a good moment. It was still an effective moment. It was still something that was needed in order to tell the story. So not necessarily surprising, but powerful. Oh, Morgan, you're just calling out everybody, aren't you? Carol, Eastman, probably Rick. The graves, I felt like surprise was just the wrong word to use. It was interesting, and I felt like there was, a really good continuing thematic element there, where now we're seeing walkers get graves, we're seeing the only evil person who Eastman ever met get a grave. Like, there's an emphasis on graves this season and how important they are. And I think that is going to continue to come up in future episodes. And somebody reminded me of a filming spoiler from over the summer. They filmed at least one other cemetery, and it wasn't this one that we saw in the episode. It looked very different. 47 days is a really long time. He must have been giving him water, or Crichton must have, I don't know, had a fairly substantial rat population to like feed off of. Lots of themes of food and eating, starving to death, imposing a vegetarian lifestyle on yourself, which is just complete opposite end of the scale of things like cannibalism and turning into a walker. And I feel like it gave the whole world a nice sense of symmetry. Around this same time last season, we were seeing that happen. Overall, I really liked that there was a hopeful feeling to this episode. I talked a little bit in my post about World War Z and how I hope that The Walking Dead learns to be a little bit more like World War Z as time goes on. I talked about how they need a sense of hope, and this episode had it. It managed to capture that. For me, the overall message of this episode was everything gets a return. Everything comes full circle. Eastman's speech that he gave to Morgan that clearly starts to change his mind about how the door is still open. The door was always open. That, to me, was at the heart of this episode. And those are the themes that I want to see emphasized on this show more. And not just included as a way to more effectively pull the rug out from under me a few scenes later. That's no fun. Stop doing that. Everything gets a return. I am excited to see what kind of things get a return. Once again, there was a lot of closure and a lot of goodbye. We were very gently taken into the idea that he's going to die. And that isn't usually necessary for a character who's only been around for one episode. In this case, I would say it was necessary. I think we did need that. So I don't think anybody really thought that Morgan had actually killed that wolf guy. I mean, not after so many months of talking about ambiguity in death, and one of the main rules is if you didn't actually see it happen, there's no way it happened. And even if you saw it happen, are you sure you saw what you saw? In the case of this wolf guy, I knew he was still alive. I knew he was going to be back. Morgan. That guy's going to screw everything up. I don't know. I guess they could do some kind of a redemption storyline if they really wanted to. Bear McCreary is a musical genius. My opera singing grandmother came in partway through this episode and she was so intrigued by the music. At one point, she said, "Somebody's dying, aren't they?" I can tell by the music. And later, he decided not to kill that man, didn't he? I could tell by the music. Like, she just. Oh, man, I love Bear McCreary. Bear McCreary once convinced me that Black Sails was my new favorite show just through the title sequence. If you haven't seen the title sequence of Black Sails, go find it right now on YouTube. Watch it. It's amazing.